Hey everybody, I am going live to discuss the Berkeley County School District plans. So I was very fortunate today to talk to Dr. Ingram and Dr. Wolf on the phone for an extended period of time and go through a lot of questions that folks had. I am going to kind of answer them, give some of my thoughts. I'm going to be available for questions. So I'm going to kind of start off with some of my thoughts about how I got to this process and which questions we're answering, and then I'm going to kind of go through the questions one at a time and talk about them. So let's get started. So I want to start by saying this isn't really a judgment of their plan. I'm not taking a position that what they're doing is right or wrong. I'm trying to use the information determined by the Accelerate Ed Task Force at the state level that was comprised of educators and administrators and health officials with recommendations for the school district. So I'm really trying to use that as my guiding principle. So really more about, does this meet the recommendation, or is it kind of falling short? What I really want for parents is transparency. I want y'all to know what the reality is, not what the hope is. I want your choice. It's your choice. I want you to understand all the factors going into it and make the best choice for you and your students based on accurate information and not what they hope it's going to be. Basically, resources, this is dependent on staff and resources, financial resources, and if we're making, I don't want the board to be making assumptions about what's going to be available. I think we need to deal in facts and what is available. So that's kind of where I'm starting from. Currently, we are facing a shortage of 62 teachers in Berkeley County, I believe is the count where we're at right now. We also have teachers that have already committed that we're using for these spaces that, that we're saying these spots are filled, for teachers that are eligible for retirement at this point. They sign a contract, but, if they can opt to retire and just not come back. And then teachers can opt to just, even that are under contract, can opt to just take some time off. And that can happen. So we need to understand we went into this with a deficit. There are teachers under contract that are eligible with actually almost no penalty, or, with a penalty they can live with, to not come back to school if they're not satisfied that everything's been done to reach them. So we're at with that. So teachers are the resource that make all of this possible. Without teachers, we really cannot execute these plans. So the district can bring people in to be with our kids. We can have adults in the room and make sure that they're safe. But teachers teaching, totally different proposition, and we are dependent on teachers to make these plans realized. I think it's important to note something that the Accelerate Ed Task Force stated kind of at the beginning of their report, and it basically said, as we move into the 2021 school year, our state education system will continue to face extraordinary new challenges that will require unprecedented levels of cooperation and coordination among students, families, staff, and school communities. So that's what we're here to talk about today is, what are some of the ways that, we can work together as a community and make sure we come through with like the best situation possible and acknowledge the fact that there is no way we're going to go back and that everything is going to be the same, and that it's going to be at the standards that it was last year before all this began. So that's, I think, an important point to note, and I want to commend the superintendent and the school board for putting this together and moving forward, because that's we just got to keep moving forward. so I think I want to start by saying the answers to many of the day in the life of a student questions and how classes are going to look in both the traditional and distant pathways and how they're going to be taught will not be decided until after the registration period. You're not going to get that answer. The registration results are going to determine how we're going to answer those questions. So they can't really answer them until they have the registration information. Dr. Ingram phrased it and said it's kind of like a chicken and egg scenario. So we just need to be aware of that. It is not ideal. I'm not thrilled about it, but just know that they will answer the questions that they can. But these really comprehensive, great questions that y'all have asked, we are not going to get in detail answers about them. That is the reality of the situation. I know that some districts have been able to answer these questions, some haven't. The reality is that we do not have these answers, and many of these answers will not be forthcoming. They are going to wait for the data that comes from the registration to be able to answer some of these questions. I will continue to put pressure on folks to get those answers, but I also want to be clear about what's been communicated to me. And so registration is going to be part of the decision-making factor for this process. So all parents have been given a choice about whether or not they want their child to go back to school or not. That is the school district's, the school board's position. Every student has the right to go back to the classroom or not go back to the classroom. So the fact that a comprehensive distance learning plan is available means that the school district feels like if there are questions or concerns about the traditional model where you're in the classroom, that is answered by the fact that a comprehensive distance learning model is available to you. So that was kind of their position on that. That was one of the first questions of, why, how can you move forward not knowing this? That was kind of the answer to that question. So my thought is that parents need to make the best choice with the information the school district is prepared to release and what we have. So that's why we're kind of going over all this. If you don't register for an option, your student will be registered in the distance learning pathway. That's the default. So if you don't specify otherwise, they are going into the distance learning pathway. That brings us to one of the biggest questions: can I switch? Can I switch? Every effort will be made to let them switch. I've heard that over and over again, and I believe it. The school district is committed to having students in the pathway that's right for them. Having said that, there is a really big "if it's possible" clause on this statement. If school resources are already stressed beyond the recommendation, they may not be able to create a seat in a classroom for your student. The hope is that every student will be able to, adjust their learning pathway to their learning style. I know that is the goal, that is the hope, that is the commitment. The reality is that they cannot guarantee at this point that your child will be allowed to switch. That is not what the plan states. That is not what is written. I don't believe that they anticipate changing that. We can certainly drive change if we want to see it, but as of right now, that's not changing. All right, so the hope, the guarantee. So that is the main reason why I have called to see the traditional pathway suspended for a short period. It's just too early to decide. There's just not enough information about the spread of the virus or the district plan's availability. And so students can all go back via the distant learning pathway, and details like these can be finalized. I appreciate the argument that kids need to be back in school both for their own mental health and because parents have to work, and what happened in the spring was just untenable for everyone. The thing is, if too many students go back and we have too many positive cases with quarantines, we will be right back where we started in the spring. We will have closed schools with inadequate distance learning resources. So yes, I agree that it is your choice to send your child back to school if you feel comfortable with that. But the idea that your decision doesn't impact other students in the school district and the community at large, I don't see how that works with the way the plan is implemented now and the Accelerate Ed Task Force. That's where I'm having a hard time making that connection. So from a policy standpoint, I don't see how that's possible. And so that's why I have taken the position that I would really like to see the school district just suspend. That just means put on hold. I don't necessarily want to not send their kids back to school, and so that's where the distance pathway comes in. But we don't talk enough about the fact that, we can push pause, that we don't have to go back. That is not a requirement from the South Carolina Department of Education. That is something that our school board has said, the Berkeley County School Board has put on itself to be able to offer that option. That is not state mandated. So just be aware of that. That's probably the one position I am going to take, is that I have concerns that if we open up, that it will just overwhelm the system and basically shut it down, and we will have lost the opportunity to take the CARES Act resource funds and the extra time that we have right now for students to prepare a quality distance learning education plan. So that's my my one thing on that. So we're gonna talk about what we do know, some questions that I was able to get answered definitively. Classrooms. Okay, so this is not a definitive answer, but it's an answer. Traditional pathway classes will be live streamed to distance learners at home, and that is a big deal. That will not happen in every classroom, but it will happen in some. It'll be one lesson plan from one teacher live streaming that class. The school will not be able to tell you what your student's class will look like until much closer to the beginning of school, because it is the registration numbers that will dictate if and when that happens. They have not put that in writing, but after discussions with many school board members and with the school district itself and superintendent level discussions, it is hard to imagine a scenario where that doesn't happen in some classrooms. And we know that the more stretched the resources become, the more likely that scenario becomes. So I do think it's worth noting that the Accelerate Ed Task Force advised against this. 3 guiding principles were established for the districts to follow when determining what their district plan would look like. And this is exactly what they said. Districts should avoid any scheduling scenario where the burden falls on a classroom teacher to simultaneously create and implement traditional and distance instructions for students during the day. That's pretty clear to me. So I really am struggling with how you can not be in compliance with a governing principle and still consider it to be, a plan that is effective and works. So my concern is, after one COVID quarantine, teachers will be quiet. This is all about teachers. And if we have a COVID quarantine, after one, federal government has mandated through some date in December that, there's one leave period they get. After that, according to the Berkeley County School District, the teachers are going to be required to use their accrued leave. Teachers accrue leave, every amount of time that you teach, you get X amount of leave that you accrue, and it does kind of bank from year to year. So after one quarantine, if they are quarantined again, or if they get sick, or if they get sick twice, teachers are going to be forced to use that accrued leave. That accrued leave has a financial value. This is, I look at this leave as delayed compensation. It's part of their contract. They all agreed to it. So there is a monetary value that these teachers can cash out with these days, because they earned them. What most do is they accumulate them because, they're your maternity leave, they're your vacation time, they're your mental health days, they're your sick days, they're really, grief days. And so if teachers are forced to use all these days up, or maybe they don't have days, so they know they're going to be docked pay if they're forced into these quarantine situations, that's going to impact their paycheck. So that's just one more reason that we need to think long and hard about, what we're giving to these teachers, what the contracts look like, and their incentives to come back to class, knowing we're walking into this situation with the teacher shortage as it is. So I will also say that when teachers are out on quarantine, that's going to leave subs in the classroom, and subs are not certified teachers. Subs are wonderful, wonderful people. Some subs are retired teachers or have some certification, but just be aware that, the qualifications for being a sub are incredibly different than being a teacher. The school district is aware of that. They will do everything to mitigate that. But at the reality, at the end of the day, if a teacher is not available, a teacher's not available. So we really don't know what student-teacher ratios are going to look like until students have registered. So your student may be in a classroom with desks that are closer than 6 feet, but there is a big, if possible, clause for this plan. So that means if the registration numbers are higher and the teacher, they do not have that appropriate teacher-student ratio, either your child is going to be in a classroom without a certified teacher, or they're going to be in a classroom where the desks are closer than 6 feet, where they're not social distance at the requirements of the Accelerate Ed Task Force and DHEC. So just be aware of that. It's not a commentary on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, although I'm not happy about that. But that is the reality. And they will not be able to tell you until registration has happened whether or not your student's classroom is going to meet that. So let's see here. I think that was it on that one. So special subjects, that's a question we got a lot about, band, art, music. So every effort will be made to include them in the schedule. I get that answer a lot. It will not look like what it looked like before this pandemic. Do not expect anything close to what we had, last year. Let's see here. They will be limited by the conditions of social distancing at the school. So, if they have a lot of students returning, that's going to make it more difficult to implement these classes. So it really is just going to depend on how many students are back in the school itself and how they can make that happen, whether or not it's going to be students moving classrooms, or if they're going to have a teacher coming to the classroom. It all depends on the numbers that come back, and they're not prepared to make any kind of they want the numbers before they're prepared to offer the plan. So we won't know what that looks like for either the traditional or the distance until registration is closed, and it probably will take them some time to accumulate that. So that is their answer. That is their policy at this point. The substitute teachers, I think we talked about this really, that if a teacher's absent, every effort will be made to secure a sub. Additional resources have been allocated for this. That is what some of the money from the CARES Act fund is going to go towards, is getting substitute teachers retained by the school. Once again, comes down to an availability issue. Is it going to be an adult that has some training, or is it going to be a certified teacher? That just is what it is. So the board is committed to not having split lists. They're committing to not having students move from taking, if there is a teacher that calls out and no sub is available, what do you do with those kids? Do you spread them out into the other classrooms? So the answer I got was the board is committed to not doing that. So when I asked the question, if no sub can be found and students will not be distributed into other classes, is there an alternative? And no. So the answer to the question is every effort's going to be made to secure a sub, and the board is committed to not splitting list. But those are the only two options right now that they have. So while they say, I don't want to say they said the answer was no, will they split that? But the answer to that question is, I think it's really going to depend on the student-teacher ratios. So I think that covers everything on classes. I see a comment here, will a sub really want to come in? And that's a huge concern. There are subs that do want to come in. There are a lot of teachers and a lot of community members that are committed to making this happen, and they want to do it, and that's great. I applaud them for that. I do not think that current teachers that don't feel comfortable, or teachers that are retired and older, that may be in a more at-risk category, we cannot penalize them for that. Every person deserves the choice about whether or not they want to come back into the school. I appreciate the argument that it's their job and that nurses are doing it. It's just not the same situation. Hey, Crystal. So we've got one of our state reps on with us right now for a little bit, Crystal Matthews. So I know she says hi. So moving on to the health and safety, there is no absentee policy. That just is what it is. I've had that question several times. There just is not an absentee policy. Eventually there will be one. It probably, I'm hoping that's one of the things that will come out before you have to make your choice. We do not know who will perform temperature checks. Logic makes you think it will either be a nurse or the teachers, but that has not really been planned out in the day of a life of the student. Like who's going to do it? How long will it take? Where will it happen? All of those things we do not know. We don't know if when they do it on the bus, how will that extra time be absorbed into bus schedules? We know that the buses really are operating, down to the wire on the timing. So those are just questions that I think is a great question, and I like that they want to do temperature checks, but I'm having a hard time understanding how they're going to make that happen, knowing that we don't necessarily have the resources of a teacher in every school all day long. What teachers already are taking on extra cleaning responsibilities, educating responsibilities. So I have not heard a plan. I have not heard anything that says like, this is how this will happen, and it won't have, what will the impact be on the school day. I do know that they purchased 1,000 thermometers, so I'm very happy about that. So they do have lots of thermometers. So quarantine students are going to be covered under the question we got a lot of was, what's going to happen to quarantine students? So students that choose to come back in the traditional model, they are exposed either somewhere else or in the classroom, and they have to go out of the school environment for the quarantine period. What's going to happen to them? That is something that the answer is they're going to be put into the learning, I think they call it the learning management policy system. And so that to me is just a fancy answer of it'll be in another manual that'll be coming out at a later date. So I think it's going to depend a lot on what the classroom looks like, what the answer to that's going to be. I think if they're in one of these classes where they're live streaming, it would be pretty easy just to transition them to they'll be one of the students that are learning by distance. If it's a different classroom situation, obviously that's not necessarily going to work. So that is a question we do not know the answer to, and I suspect that we will not know the answer to that until after the registration period because it is dependent on student-teacher ratios. COVID testing, this was a big one. So the school district will not pay for COVID testing. They, for students that do not have insurance, can't find a free test, there is not an answer as of right now of how they will be able, the pathway for them to return to school if they are part of the DHEC policy that requires one per the guidelines. They just haven't answered that question yet. And to me, that's a huge issue is how will students, especially students that don't have the financial resources to get the tests that are required on the flow chart that DHEC has provided and that the Berkeley County School District has posted on their website. They have not really provided a plan for how to make that possible, how to make that happen. So that's something that is going to have to get figured out. So the other thing that really concerned me is how are they going to, what's policy and how are they going to get those test results back and then store those test results so that there's some record of them and not violate privacy policies and HIPAA. They're requiring a negative test result. That is the result of a medical test. That's just a problem that's going to have to be figured out how to solve. And it hasn't been solved yet. So that is frustrating. So another big question that people have had is the low, medium, high classification from DHEC. And that is something that came out of the task force. It was one of the things that the Accelerate Ed Task Force kind of asked to happen as soon as possible. It would be a guiding principle for how districts could figure out which plan to use, how to go back, when to go back. It's always been a little loose. Like I love that DHEC puts it out every week. If you go to their website, you're going to see every week where they did a report. You see a great little map. Right now that map is like all blue, which is the high category for all the counties. So they have, Berkeley County definitively stated that the low, medium, and high classification from DHEC will not have an impact on the district plans. That the choice of the parents, they have that information, they will be making those decisions. So no judgment on that, just that's what the information is. There is that low, medium, high classification system from DHEC. Those numbers are updated regularly. We are currently in Berkeley County in the in that high category, and that will not disqualify the traditional plan. That is not in direct violation of the Accelerate Ed recommendations, but it also, I mean, it's not really. I don't think it really complies. So once again, I guess parents have the choice, and that whole idea of the choice and the high, that is why I kind of have a problem. That's why I've called for them to suspend that traditional model, is that the decisions of some parents to send their kids back to school, while it is their decision, it impacts the community and it impacts other students in the district. And so that's where, personal choice kind of overlaps into our community responsibility. And that's always tough when that happens. And I think we have to look, when I look at the Accelerate Ed Task Force, the state superintendent's office, the state experts that we elected, they are saying that we need to be measured in how we go back. And according to the data they've established, we're really in a situation where it's really clear that there are dangers in going back. So the next big one was the mask policy. So this won't apply to everybody, but for any of the schools that are in the city of Charleston and in the Berkeley County School District, which we could have a long conversation about why that happened and why that's possible, but they have conflicting mask policies. And the funny thing was the city wasn't totally aware of it until I talked to Mayor Tecklenburg about it. And so we have stumped them. They have both punted to their legal counsel. So that means it'll be forever before we get an answer on that. So yeah, basically, I do not have an answer on that. That the policy for the mask, that the city of Charleston, if you're over 10, you're supposed to be wearing one, and that the school district has says that it is encouraged but not required. We will get the answer from the attorneys, and just the fact that they even have to go to their attorneys means that I don't really know that we're going to get an answer that's enforceable or whatever. So I think every parent will just have to decide, you know, where they think we're going to be with that. And all I got to say is look around in your community, see who's wearing masks, and you're probably going to see a pretty similar look in the classroom, if that, because it's even harder for kids, I think. So transportation, that was a big one that we had a lot of questions about. The staggered release times for the elementary and middle school, especially for Philip Simmons, they're going to have to do it. They're going to have to stagger it to establish social distancing, and parents just need to be prepared that the way that they've really tried so hard to make it convenient for parents, that safety is going to trump the ease of trying to move everybody. Like, we've got to keep the kids, you know, separated somewhat. And we get it, sibling, you know, you really want to be able to pick up both, but that's probably not a realistic goal. There is not anything on paper yet what that's going to look like. There's no idea of like what kind of staff is going to be required to make that happen. This is just kind of one of those things where they generally know we need to social distance. We know that the buses should only be running at about 50% capacity. That's what we know. And so there isn't really a flow chart or a plan that says this is how we're going to fix it. This is how we're going to address it. I mentioned the buses. You know, the bus. Everybody knows about the buses. Like Berkeley County Bus, we're working on that. The DHEC, the task force, has recommended that the buses run at 50% capacity to accommodate for social distancing. Once again, the big clause on that is if possible, if more students enroll that are going to use the bus transportation, that's what it is. It's not going to be limited. They're not going to limit enrollment. They're not going to limit students riding on the bus. They have asked that if you can provide your own transportation, if you can get your kids to school to do that. That's been on the website. I'm assuming it still is. Just be aware of that. But that also means that we're going to see increased lines in the car rider line. We know in some schools that that's an issue. It's going to require more staff, more resources, more space, more equipment. I don't know that we really know we're going to need this and these cars. You know, I kind of think to the line at if anybody goes to Chick-fil-A, like how they like implemented all these crazy plans going through their parking lots and things, and it requires more cones, it requires more people. So, you know, this is going to cost money. Do we have that money allocated? Those are all questions that I don't really think have been answered. That plan hasn't really come up yet. So future release of information. If anybody's read the manual that came out yesterday on the website yesterday evening, there is a BCSD Student Empowered Learning Pathways 2021 that was referenced for that distance learning. I think it's going to be as close to a day in the life as we're going to get. I think it's going to be more guidelines and recommendations and an actual this is what it's going to look like. So that should come out next week. And then every district is required to do a distance learning contingency plan. So if the governor shuts down the schools, or the school district makes the decision to not have in-person classes, to basically suspend that traditional model, they have to have a distance learning contingency plan. And they have committed that to that being ready or released by the start of the school year. So let me go through some of these questions, some of these comments that I see here, and let's see here. I see, will assistants be in classrooms? So no, you know, you're going to have to be part of the Berkeley County School District staff, so either a teacher or a staff member, to be in the school. They're not going to allow volunteers or parents to help mitigate the spread of the virus. What about kids with special needs? Okay, this was near and dear to my heart because I am a special needs parent. 5014 and IEPs must be honored whether you're in the traditional or the distance or virtual pathway. You'll need to communicate with your school's principal about that. This was a small piece of why I think that when we talk about maybe suspending that is, more money, more resources for occupational therapists, speech therapists, physical therapists, tutors, different technology can all be used to help this. So yes, I mean, because there are definitely students that benefit from being in the classroom, depending on the diagnosis or depending on, if it's a high level need. It's actually sometimes easier to be in the classroom. But if that can't happen, they are committed to, honoring honoring what needs to happen with the 504 and IEP. Now, I know that we have them, we have the goals, and the reality of that falls very short. That was my experience of what the school could offer. Really didn't meet my needs for my son. So I'm very sympathetic that that's a crappy answer. We need to be spending more money to meet the needs of kids that fall outside of the typical. And so that's an issue that we came in with it. It is by law, it is part of the plan. I know that they want to help kids that, have special needs. Their ability to deliver that has not changed. I mean, this pandemic hasn't helped any of these situations. If it was a problem before and you weren't getting all the resources that you needed before, nothing about this situation is going to make that better. My hope is that it will at least maintain, that it will be as good as it was. We'll see. Let's see here. We've got, what about some student teachers in the classroom? So student teachers, that hasn't come up. I'm going to have to ask about that. I don't know if they fall in the volunteer or the staff category. I'm going to have to find out because I don't know the answer to that. If anybody knows, please chime in. Let's see here. Okay, so I think that's it. Does anybody have any other questions? Speak now. All right, I can do these again. So tomorrow at 12:30, I am doing a fun Thursday chat. Well, not a fun, but an informative chat with Jen, the previous principal of Philip Simmons, who is a current professor at the College of Charleston, is going to be coming on to talk. That's what she does. She does, education administration and works with teachers. And we are going to talk about what's going on with the Berkeley County plan and try to answer parents' questions. This chat is going to be more about how do you make that choice? How do you make that best decision? This is going to be a little bit more driven by her expertise, knowledge based on what we know. How can you make this decision? Because we know that only about a third of folks have actually made the decision and enrolled, registered their child, via one of the pathways. So a lot of folks still have a lot of questions and need a lot of information. So going ahead, and you can either post your questions in the comments here. You can post your comments in the discussion tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. live here on the Facebook page, or you can email me questions in advance. And whatever we don't get a chance to, I will make sure and get an answer and get it to you. My email is Jen, Jen at Jen4SC, JEN4SC.com. Let's see here. Derek, yes, I will inbox you. Okay, so I think that's everything. So we'll be back tomorrow at 12:30. For my Charleston County constituents, things are going better in Charleston County. Not to say that there aren't things we need to talk about, but I don't think it's quite. There's a lot more written down on paper, a lot more answers. The principals and the district are responding in a way we're seeing that doesn't require quite as much pressure to get that information out there. We will be talking about Charleston County. If y'all have questions about Charleston County, please ask them. Both counties are in this district, so I am happy to be a liaison or an advocate in either county. But right now, Berkeley County just I don't want to complicate a process in Charleston County that is moving along. Anytime I'm calling up asking for answers or demanding something, I'm taking their time away. So I try to be really mindful of, am I helping the process or am I hurting the process? So trying to be staying in the helping the process. All right, so that's it. Thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate it. Like I said, feel free to email or call me if you have any questions. I am running to be your advocate, your to get you what you need to, make your life run smooth in South Carolina. So this is the job I'm signing up for. Don't hesitate to ask me about it. So thanks so much, everybody, and it was a pleasure. Have a great night.